Oh, that's you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to Grace Kingston and my VR studio demo. Let's go through everything. This is a little bit more hectic. My heart's going a little bit faster than normal because this is the first time that we've done a VR studio live stream where the other artist is remote. So we've got Grace, that I will turn on for a second, in the corner there, ready to chat to everyone. And I'm just going to go through the intros. As always, thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching this after the fact, thanks for looking up in the archives. This is still experimental this week, more so than usual, with all of the different bits and pieces that need to go into getting the Zoom to live stream and then the headset to live stream. So just make sure if there's something wrong with the audio, you can't hear someone talking, then just give us a yell in the comments and we'll know that we need to make some technical adjustments. So the live stream format is going to be fairly informal. What we're going to do is just run through a demo of what the VR experience is like. This one with Grace's is particular because it's actually supposed to be installed in the forest, actually. So we already had an opening launch for this work where we all chuffed off to the forest to a particular part of it that we've sort of built the experience around, put people in the headset, and then sort of sent them on their way to go around and touch things and sort of listen to the ambient sound and everything. So one thing that I can do later on is play a little bit of a environment recording that we've got from where it was set up originally. Maybe we can show some pictures of what it looked like, the spot that we placed it in, because for this work it's very much sort of site specific. So the VR experience operates within the context of this clearing in the forest and all the lovely sounds of the water going by and everything. So there'll be plenty of time. The demo, we'll talk through it and show what it's like, and there'll be plenty of time to answer questions and maybe jump into how we did it and the concepts and everything behind it. Just if you have any questions at any point, then just let me know. Just throw it into the comments and we'll respond. I'd like to acknowledge Australia Council for helping to support this project. So this is part of a set of 9 VR studios where I'm working with 9 different artists to explore how we can use virtual reality in their practice. So this could be anything. We're doing all sorts of weird experiments and trying to figure out what use of virtual reality will be most accommodating to different artists' practices. And this might not even be the end result going out into VR. This could be maybe the workflow, maybe the way that people are working and producing those works happens entirely in VR, and then the way of presenting it isn't necessarily in VR. But we're doing all sorts of exploration with this technology. And this live stream, as well as the ones that have come before, are available on the Tactical Space Lab Facebook page and also on the Tactical Space Lab website. So you can go to there and see all the artists that are involved in the studio, and get a bit more information. I think I'm done for my intro. Tacticalspace.org is the website. Where you can find more information. You can link to it through the Facebook page. Now I think I will introduce the artists. So for this set of the couple of weeks of VR Studio, I was working with Grace Kingston. I'll just bring her up on screen and make sure that everything's working. Okay, so I think people can hear you now. So Grace Kingston is an artist who for a long time has been working with the intersection between ideas of nature and technology. And I'm really looking forward to getting into a bit of a discussion of that sort of weird relationship between artifice and nature. She has got a really fantastic practice. You can find out some more information about the things that she does on her website, which I will just have to... There's very, very elaborate setup here, so I will have to turn it on to see if we can find it. There we go, gracekingston.com, and you can find all of her artworks in her portfolio on that website. Yeah, great. So please join me in welcoming Grace via the comments. And as always, what we'll do is just go through the process of showing what we've done in VR, and then throw any comments that you have or questions, and we'll respond to them as they come. Grace, do you want to say anything?
I just wrote in the comments, this is wild, thank you, Josh. But then a Y was that thank you, Joshy, which I think is also fine. Thanks for promoting my website. Yes. So this is my first time doing anything like this. I feel like a little bit anxious, but I'm also excited about doing something live. Katja replied, thanks, Katja. Thank you. So yes, I'll try and be a bit less stilted. I think it's nice to like introduce the space you're in. So I'm in my bedroom. There's a couch. There's lots of artworks from my friends. And I've also got a PC here. So I'm gonna like be looking away a bit to be on the PC and replying to comments and stuff. But yes. Cool. I'm excited about this because I think it's going to be interesting to, like you said, view this artwork in the non-site specific place and have a chat about that. So yeah,
I suppose for context, what I could say is just opening up your website. This image here, do you have many images on the website of it installed? Yes, you do.
Yes, I got that.
So this is, I'll just turn you off for a second so that we can see
the most beautiful Belarusque artist who was a cover girl. Yeah. And then Josh is a girl
and then I'm there as well. So it was this lovely clearing in the forest in Centennial Park that we placed it in. And in a minute or at some point during the next hour, I can play some of the soundscape that I recorded in that location as well, just so that you get an idea of what it might have felt like to have been in that space. And this project, we were playing with a few things. We were sort of, I was talking with Grace about how to respond to a few of the ideas that she's worked with in the past. Some of them being these mossies, which are taking this sort of vibrant texture of moss from photographs. Ooh, that's great. And they had, can we hear the sound from those as well? Didn't quite pick it up, but that's all right.
No, it's coming, it's coming. This one's in Cavelli. I actually don't know where the Mac laptop microphone is. But
I have no idea either. So we were looking at this sort of maybe ambiguous... Oops. Oh, sorry. The video is saying that it's having problems playing.
I feel like at the moment we might be about to get Luke Letourneau, which is also great.
Sorry? Oh yeah, in the picture as well. I'm a little bit worried that our the live stream might have gone off.
No, it's still good on mine. See, I've got it, like I said, on the two separate computers.
Okay.
It's going great.
Okay. Well, just let me know. It must be Facebook on this side has just sort of gone a little bit weird, which is slightly stressy, but I'm sure it's fine. Actually, I'll just restart it. Okay. So, what I'm going to do without further ado is jump into, we're going to do a little bit of a shuffle. I'm going to turn on the microphone on the VR headset, and I am going to go into the VR, and I'm going to let Grace talk through what the experience is. So we were doing a few things. This, as I said, ambiguous relationship between technology, or the representation, the use of technology to represent nature, I suppose you could say. Grace can talk about it a little bit more in detail, but we were using some kind of nice, bits and pieces in terms of the technology. So the Quest has just come out with hand tracking, so we could put people into this space. The Quest doesn't need to be plugged in or have any trackers, so that we could go off into the forest and it would run happily. we could spatially map that experience into the forest, and then without needing controllers, people could go out and sort of wave their arms around and see their hands represented in that space. And then you could sort of reach over and touch the trees and get a sort of visceral connection to the environment that's mapped physically. So when you touch what looks like a tree in the VR, you're actually touching the real tree in the space as well. And I suppose I want to talk at some point about that representation of the hands as well, but I'm sure we'll get a chance to jump back into that. I'll just make a note. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the microphone for the VR headset and switch it over. Okay. And
I think you're quiet now, Josh. Josh.
okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Wow, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Very happy that that's working. Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
And because I can't really tell what the level this microphone is set to, just let me know or let Grace know, because she's looking at the comments, if you can hear me okay. And Grace, can you see in the screen share the VR?
Yeah. That's awesome. I can see in the live screen share what's happening, but in the Zoom screen share that we have, it's still amazingly Plutono, which is cool. But maybe we should.
No, I can fix that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, sweet.
Okay, so your hands.
Here's my hands.
Mm.
Oh, also I should turn up so much to do. I should turn up the audio for this one so everyone can hear what's going on in the background as well. Okay, cool. So do you want to talk through this experience, Grace, or do you want me to do anything in particular?
Okay, so first of all, this took so long for us to make. It was really cool and exciting. It was like the opposite of any other artwork I make, where I feel like I maybe spend, I don't know, 20% of my time sort of ideating and thinking about it, and then I make a little plan. I'm like, yeah, and then most of the stuff I do, I feel like it's kind of grunt work, doing the stuff. This was the opposite. We spent so much time talking about this idea. What are we doing? It was it took a lot longer than I expected. It was really fun and challenging for me to. We did a lot of work that we had to discard and get to get to this point, and then in the end it came together, and I was like, oh wow, that didn't take very long, and it looks and feels awesome, and I'm excited by it. So yeah, as Josh is moving around the space, I guess I was the first one in this round of Josh's VR Studios to do a work with him. So I felt excited. I think I'm the first one to use the Quest with you. Is that right?
Yeah.
Prior to that, you've been using the ELD Oculus, the new one. So I was lucky to be able to jump on those low-hanging fruit ideas of touchy early on. And it also works really well with my work, like we were talking about with little mossy sculptures I've done in the past. We have to press them and sort of hold up to your ear to hear them, to have a touchy element to what we wanted to do. And so I was thinking about how these are sort of more beautified, artificial ideas of nature in a kind of condensed, clean way. How we could sort of bring that to an actual space. So I guess that's why we chose to photogrammetrically map the space and make a sort of constructed environment around it. It's interesting too, I think, when we're looking at the stream that you're showing us now, with the sort of rainforest set box. I was, a lot of people were saying, like, wow, how'd you get, like, you know, the environment that we're in Centennial Park inside the game? And I was like, we didn't at all. That's like completely just a fiction as well.
Yeah.
So it was really fun to play with that idea of constructed fake real things in a real space. Yeah, and I was really excited to work with you with the idea of actual touch, because I think that is really exciting in terms of digital realms, to sort of remove the layer of glass or plastic that we usually have sort of as the point of intersection between us and the work in a digital way. So it was cool. What did you think about it? I mean, yeah, how was your experience with us?
Me. Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's always interesting sort of doing this. I mean, and Grace was the first person for the 2020 VR studios. We only did 4 people for the 2018 ones, but it's, you know, kind of an interesting balance between how much time you give to exploring aesthetic ideas and how much to sort of just making something as a proof of concept. You know, with that thing, trying to do VR as a creative practice or an art practice, so much about the reading of the work is at the whim of just very small things that could if you do them wrong, it could be completely shift the way that people read the work. So, you know, just how much time you spend on one thing and how much you sort of theatrically just sort of fill in the gaps for something else is an interesting question. Another thing is kind of interesting is to what extent we were playing with really pushing the use of the technology and just what you can do with it. And for Grace's, it was really nice because it fitted so well into a couple of things that have only just come out. So the hand tracking that we're using here had only just come out for the Quest. Before that, maybe you'd have the old style of VR headsets, and you could get the little extra bit of kit that you'd stick onto the front of the headset, and all of this incredible amount of complexity to try and track hands. Because this came along with it, and because it came in a headset that you could just put into the forest, it allowed us to do things without, you know, trying to bang our head against figuring out how to do it. It was just sort of came along with the use of the Quest. I'm going to do one thing, which is just reset this, because there's some emergent elements of this experience. So one thing that's going on is we have, when you first start, this clear environment. Grace, can you still hear me? Is everything still going?
Yeah, I'm all good.
So you have this clear environment, and we've got something which is sort of, if you remember that this is happening within the context of actually being out in the forest. Oh, my hands, talking of hands, my hands have just gone funny. So you're out in the actual forest, and there's ambient sounds going on. But the way that we've sort of built the responsive sound element is that the quieter you are, the less moving around you make in the environment. So if I start sort of getting a little bit more active, everything sort of fades out, including the sound. And then when you stand still, all of this sort of thing comes back in quite a nice way. It sort of washes over with color, and then different elements of the sound come in the more still you are in the environment. And then we have another element of it. I'm just going to reset it again so that my hands work. Having just said how amazing this technology is, the fact that my hands are pointing in the wrong direction is kind of funny. Yeah, they're still weird. That's probably because I just use the controllers.
Maybe,
how funny. My hands aren't this way around.
Thinking about the sound, maybe now would be a good time to shout out to Chris Hancock, who provided the sound for the experience in the VR headset. I'm just going to like pop a link to the EP that we pinched some of the sounds from for this experience on the Facebook chat. Chris is amazing. He has a lot of different I guess, artist names he works under. But in this time, he's working under Open Space. Opening Space is the EP by Open Spaces. But other people know Chris from 107 Projects in Redfern and stuff, and just being a general audio champ also. So I was really grateful for him to lend us some sounds and help us make a really cool experience.
And it really, it's so easy when you're working with something that seems to be totally visual to ignore the sound element of something, but VR really, it's all about the sound and the acoustics and all of that. It's just fairly, we could talk about Johanni Plismo if we're going to talk about sensory experiences, representing sensory experiences, which is some of the sort of the reading that we were sharing around about the time of developing this. Just before I sort of place this on the corner and let it do its thing, there's one more bit which is like, you see that the environment sort of fades in with the color, but there's also a little bit of a generative element that's sort of wandering around the environment. If you can see, it's just drawing this moss over the space. So once you jump into it, it's effectively a clean slate, and then for each person the moss will sort of draw in a different way and in a different place and form different patterns across the environment. And then if you leave it for long enough, it just sort of fills up with this mossy pattern over everything, which I think looks quite nice. All right, I'll stick it on the chair and then we'll get back to chatting. All right, so I think I'm back with everyone. Hopefully that's all working. I'll just turn off the audio for the headset as well. Do we have any questions or anything, or should we dive into... Whoa, there's heaps of... Are you following what people are saying, Grace? Because I've just sort of jumped into the end of it.
Everyone's saying nice things about us, Josh. That's really nice.
That's nice.
No questions, I don't think, as yet. Questions. I'm here on the chat. All right, questions.
Okay.
So should we dive back into Johanni Plismo, which is the text that Josh was talking about before, which is one of those things, when you read like a really iconic text of a discipline and you're like, I haven't read that before, but it's called Eyes of the Skin, and it's an theoretical philosophical architectural text by this amazing Finnish architect that was a really cool sort of, I guess, grounding text to work from with Josh. Even though I've been working in kind of installations for ages, I hadn't really done much reading in architecture stuff, which is probably a bit remiss of me, but yes, that idea of the eyes, they're kind of like Merleau-Ponty style vibe of experiencing something as a whole experience, as like a visceral, a bodily, a thing, was sort of really highlighted in that work, and I really liked it, and it sort of set me off thinking about how we could do stuff like that, particularly with this when we did it on the day. I kept inviting people to touch the trees in the space and feel they were like sort of paper bark, or there's a couple of different trees, but the feeling of the bark on your hands, I think, would be really exciting and unique in a VR way, which often feels quite I don't know, sort of contained, quarantine, like you're in the headset. To be able to sort of like break out of that headset mindset and touch a real thing while looking at something different, I think it's going to be really cool, and people seem to think so as well. And I also was thinking about this idea of like I don't know, a touch glitch, if that makes sense. Because there was a couple of times, it's not so easy to like set your VR environment to be exactly the same as the real environment, where there's like maybe like this much space off the game hands to the actual tree, that I think made it more fun and interesting and strange. Where people are like, oh, I can't feel it, and then like their hands in the actual thing might dive through the tree a little bit before they actually get to feel the texture of the real life thing. Yes. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, it's more interesting than getting everything totally perfect to have those points that pull you away from a one-to-one mapping of the VR space into the physical space. And I suppose, in that conversation that we had, or the many conversations that we had about it, and I would like to jump into that sort of relationship between nature and technology at some point, but just trying to figure out, rather than doing something that was trying to recreate, how sincere we are about, or zealous, I suppose is probably the word, zealous to think that we can use technology to recreate nature in a particular way. I think you can use any medium to sort of poetically represent nature. You can write a poem about something. You can write a bit of music that sort of gives a sense of something without trying to sort of one-to-one capture it or represent it. But for this one, because we had it sort of placed in situ in the environment, some of the design decisions, like being aware of what the soundscape that it was going to sit within was going to be, were kind of more about using the VR as a sort of tool to make people maybe more appreciative of the actual soundscape. For example, like that thing that they have to slow down to listen to it, and it's sort of annotated or added to with Chris's sound, but then in the background you have all of those. You may be more appreciative to the sounds of the actual forest clearing. That was certainly what happened for us, because when we sat down to, I'd done a few site surveys of different places to try and figure out a nice place to install it. And it had appreciated at that point that there was a nice creek running through it and making bubbly sort of noises. But then when I sat down with Grace to record the audio, just in case we needed to present it without the environment, and you're just there and it's sort of framing your experience of that site through the ears of the sound recorder, as it were. So you actually, if a dog barks and you don't want a recording of a dog, then it's a little bit annoying, but you're just sort of hypersensitive to all of the different sounds in the environment. And because it's a 360 sound recorder, it's this H2N thing, so it records, you can hear the direction that the sound is coming from. That means that when you're standing there, you're also appreciating, look, those birds. At one point there was a flock of cockatoos that flew from one corner of the park and did this big circle overhead and then went back, and it was something. It's really funny to think that even though technology often distracts us from our environment or for things that we might be more mindful of, there are circumstances where that technology can sort of make you more aware or frame your experience of that in a particular way. I suppose in the same way that if you're developing something in a darkroom and there's like a little like ray of light somewhere that's not supposed to be there, you're hypersensitive to that just because of the way that the technology is sensitive to the world. I think I went on a little bit of a segue there. But yes, absolutely, Grace, I agree.
So I was just thinking, they actually asked some questions in the comments now, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Just so, Eugene says, awesome guys, well done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mark says, how far can users explore? That's really interesting. It's so the quest itself can go, feels maybe like 4 meters by 4 meters. Is that right?
In theory, and this sort of goes to Lou's question about the perimeters and the obstacles as well, because what you do, I can't entirely show it with the way that we've got it set up here, what the process of setting it up is, but you basically draw a boundary on the ground. The way that the Quest understands the world, it's got 4 cameras on it. It's actually very similar to the process of photogrammetry, so the process that I use to reconstruct the landscape. And we can probably have a look at that sort of the technical process of that if we need to. It's pretty interesting. It looks pretty good. So the Quest looks out into the world, and it looks at all of these points in the world and how they move as the headset is moving, and from that it figures out how far away everything is and where it must be. And this boundary space that you can get in a sort of indoor situation is about 7 meters by 7 meters, so really big. There was a little bit of a problem doing this install outside underneath a tree canopy, because some of the points that it was looking at to understand what the world around it was were the leaves that were moving the whole time, so that sort of confused it a little bit and kind of effectively reduced the size of the space that we could get away with really being able to traverse. But we did pretty much have it at about 5 meters, I suppose. There's 3 trees in the environment. I'll just turn it off, and I can jump into turn off this one and turn on that one. Jump into the scene view just to show this. So there's the little bubbling brook creek thing. The experience sort of started facing that, so you could hear that, and that's the main tree that you'd interact with. And then there's these 2 other trees, and we pretty much managed to have you just about touching those 2, but then main focus was around here. And that distance, I suppose, was about 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 meters. And one thing, actually, talking about the obstacles, you'll see in this reconstruction, if I throw just what material can I put onto it? You might be able to see that there's not heaps and heaps of detail. These things are fairly flat, but then as you get towards this area here, the bit of wood is in a little bit more detail. You can sort of see the boundaries of it a bit more, and these roots are in a bit more detail. And then as you get to this point where the roots go down to the water, that's all a lot more detail. And that was basically just trying to stop people from falling in the water. So because their view of the world at that point is sort of entirely dictated by the VR headset, I just wanted to make sure that they wouldn't trip up too much on that root that sticks up, or have a feeling that they could progress in this direction and lose their footing. Yes, so it's a fairly large area that you can get away with the Quest.
Okay, next question I'm seeing is Louise says, how'd you map the VR space to photogrammetry space to IRL landscape? Well, we a lot of photos, basically, and then reconstructing that photogrammetry landscape in Josh's computer, then bringing it out to the real thing, and then trying to map up obvious points like the trees with it, and then scaling it appropriately. Is that about right, Josh?
Yeah. So the process that we use is basically what I did was a 3D scan of the environment. So we had pretty much a one-to-one model of the position of the trees and the ground and everything that we could put into Unity, which is a program that we use to build these VR experiences. And then another thing that I could show is there's a little bit of a sort of configuration at the start of the experience that you only need to run once, which is going in and just positioning the worlds in relation to the trees and everything. So you make little reference points, and then you just shuffle everything around until it fits nicely. And ideally it would have been a little bit more automated. I could have done something where it would sort of automatically fit it into, setting 5 points in the real world and 5 points in the virtual space and have it all magically happen, but it's kind of outside of the scope of the time that we had to work on it. I might open the model if I can find it. Sydney Park, no. Just going to have a look and see if I can find the reconstruction, because it's quite an interesting process. Ah, here we go. Cool. So, what's this? Okay, let's see if I can walk through this. I won't spend too long sort of focusing on it, but it looks pretty sweet, so I might as well get props for, for doing the cool technology. So we started off with heaps and heaps of images. Here's all of our images. Let's see if I can bring them up in the main screen. So can I run through? Page up, page down. So heaps and heaps, like maybe, how many have got? 350 images of different parts of the environment. And it works quite well because there's all sorts of like organic feature points that it can match. It looks really interesting to the computer. All of these bits and pieces, all the bits of tree and everything, you throw that into a bit of software which is designed to do this photogrammetry process. And I've been doing it for a while, so I have a fairly good awareness of what works and what doesn't and the way that you need to take pictures. And then what you get, let's see if I can go through the processes. Then you get this thing which is sort of its first attempt, which isn't very many, it's not very sort of high detail, but it's just picking out individual points in the different photos that it thinks are of the same thing. So you can kind of get an idea that it really likes trees and it really likes the ground because there's a lot of interesting detail there. And then, ooh, this one's big, 4 million faces. I wonder if this is going to run slow. Okay, and then you do a much more dense version of this. As you can see, there's 23 million points in here, so a fair amount of detail. You can keep on zooming in, and you see that that detail sort of manages to capture a bunch of the shape, even though it's still just points when you zoom into it. You can kind of get a feel for what shape everything is, and then you build a 3D model from it, so it just basically tries to form a surface over all those points. And can we see the... Oh, slightly taxing for the computer. It might... Okay, there we go. So this is 4.5 million faces. So this is the sort of model that we've got. And then I do a little bit more cleaning up to get that to run happily in the Quest, because it's a mobile device. It doesn't have very much sort of oomph to it. Yeah, so that was really nice because I'm very familiar with that process. It was nice to bring in that process as a very easy way to do the one-to-one modeling. So at the same time as getting a representation of the environment that you can have in the experience itself, you also get the positioning and the map of everything in the space as well. So it was kind of nice to have that. Yes.
Cool. So just following up with some more questions. We had from Monique, what cheese did you have, Grace? I had Wednesday with cranberries. It's very good. Ingrid asks, what obstacles, if any, did you encounter planning and staging installation in a public space? We had none because we didn't ask and we just did it. So that's a tip there. Then what else do we have? I had Louise ask, how did you stay plugged in a space that's nature and map the VR obstacles perimeters? I think that Josh maybe answered some of that just then, pointing out how he did that process. But we were also just around as well, because there are some, it's a real topical, like, it's a place where you could fall over and hurt yourself. So I think just having people around in the space to guide people while they're in the headset when you feel maybe a bit vulnerable because you can't see anything was the key there. I'm not sure if that really answered the question though. Louise said, are you trying to fuck us into digital VR tactical touch, Grace and Josh? Oh, the glitch. Yes, we are. So confirming that. And then what else? Eugene says, love listening to you, Josh. Me too. Tariq says, party emoji, same. And Louise says, you guys are trying to break the internet. Hopefully one day we are. I don't quite have the Kim Kardashian booty, but maybe one day. Yes.
So we're
that's the end of the questions so far.
I've got a couple of questions. Well, one. Okay. I have a list of questions that are what, why, how, and I suppose it's kind of quick fire. Now, why now? Why
Okay.
we wanted to do this thing now with this technology, I suppose. But I also want to ask you to generally talk about that relationship between representation of nature with technology, because I found this really interesting in your practice.
In my practice. Oh, okay. So I think I'm trying to think about which part we found interesting. I don't know. So what I do? Yeah, you go.
All right. So it wasn't entirely clear when we were talking about the sort of the intent of representing nature wasn't one of like wholly sincerely, let's try and look, this is totally achieving, zealots, technologists thinking that they can do it. And for me, like kind of this question of the relationship between nature and artificiality in VR is also maybe just a question for VR in general, because all of that thing of, I think there's directions to go in terms of stylized or poetic experience, and I think that art is much, much better placed to deal with those questions than like games and film who are just trying to get up to the point of photorealism. So actually I'd say that artists are in a nice position to best take advantage of the strengths of VR and maybe respond to the weaknesses just by not trying to make it a spectacle or a reflection on nature. But I would love to hear how you think this project managed to fit itself into your practice and things like the mossies, for example.
So, I think that I liked the idea of a kind of curated landscape that I've been working with mossies and with other sort of works I've been doing. So I guess like just before this work I did with Josh, I did a work at Auburn at Peacock Gallery. I took a lot of photos and made some work based on their Japanese garden across the road from the gallery there. And it was nice because I did sort of a more larger live-in, step-in, life-size version of these works I was doing before, where I guess I'm trying to like document my experience of the landscape and then reimagine it into sort of curated, I guess glossier, obviously faker objects as a sort of conversational piece with that landscape. So here's what I heard, and here's me taking a lot of photos of those, putting them together in a kind of collaged version of what's real, editing out all the nasty bits, editing out any of the like rubbish or dying plants, that kind of thing, and making this kind of collaged, perfect version of nature to experience in a closed-in experience, in a closed-in environment of a gallery kind of thing. So to make that kind of closed-in, curated version of a thing in VR, it was, I guess, interesting because it left out all of the tactility of my other works that I've made, and made it, well, it felt like it could have, and made it like almost entirely fake, whereas before I felt like I was riffing off a reel. So I feel like bringing in the realness of an actual environment's touch, sense, sensual sort of thing, it's just like the next step in the sort of things I've been thinking about, which is really exciting. I feel like I'm very good at monotoning, so do you have anything to riff off that, Josh?
Well, it just occurred to me that when you were talking about that artificiality and the curating, that there was a bit of a reference to social media in general and the way that people present themselves, curate themselves, present the world, that sort of engagement. And I suppose it's all part of the same conversation. If you are maybe not so directly through the VR sort of thing, maybe thinking more of those entirely, even though this is based on a real landscape, the attempt to sort of convincingly simulate the experience of being surrounded in an environment has got so much artifice in it that it kind of reminds me more of those totally invented CGI Instagram people, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, the new models kind
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah. Yeah, IT had a profile on them recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I think, sorry, I'm just refreshing on my PC because it froze for a bit. I think it was, I feel like we actually achieved a lot considering the 2 week time span we had to sort of do this work together. And I particularly like the way people, when they came to the actual launch, which was like mid-February, sort of just prior to COVID lockdown stuff, I like the way people came there immediately wanted to push the technology. My friend Phil was just like, where's the boundary? Trying to break it. Johnny Douglas was like on the ground touching the floor immediately, whereas most people, a lot of people just went to the tree at first. That was really cool.
There's an interesting thing around, augmented reality. When augmented reality first came out, with projects like virtual art galleries, and I will continue to be pretty cynical about augmented reality because for so long the technology has massively got in the way of the experience. And I think at the point where the technology becomes seamless into our perception of the world, then it will just be a absolute fantasy of marketing, and I think politically and in not sharing a public space or a public sense of reality in that way is a scary thing. I think it's Charlie Brooker. I think Charlie Brooker has a joke from about 10 years ago that people will use augmented reality to replace homeless people with Disney cartoon characters. And it's so close. Charlie Brooker is the main writer from Black Mirror. It's so close to being to being a reality that for augmented reality, I just think, when all of this stupid thing of holding your phone there gets out of the way, it's going to be a horrible monster. But until that, a lot of those experiences, the fact that you're holding your camera is something that's fairly distracting or like very particularly frames the way that you experience that thing. So it's, everyone say 8 years ago where they're going around these virtual art galleries with their phone, it's impossible you have to really be committed to the Emperor's New Clothes to suspend the feeling that you're actually more involved in the novelty of holding your phone and you're actually looking at your phone screen rather than using it as some window into some other world. But I think something interesting about the VR is like, even though the technology can be, it can be something that is all encompassing in the novelty of the experience, at the same time, it's not that focused vision. You're actually sort of, you get a bodily sense of being in an environment. Which is kind of interesting. I don't know, just going off on a direction in terms of what comes with that experience of questioning and pushing the technology. And it's a story that I've told a few times about using VR for the first time after I was 8 years old in the first wave of VR and was massively disappointed. So the second time, I suppose, was when the Oculus Rift first came out. The DK1, the developer kit one, and I was doing research that was sort of related to it, so I got it and I'm like, okay, this is necessary for my research to at least be engaged in this. I was about to put it on and I had this sort of like list of things in my head of what's the refresh speed, will the latency make me feel motion sick or whatever, just totally cynical. And I put it on and 30 seconds later I was pointing in a totally different direction in my room, or basically like in a totally different corner of the room, having no embodied sense of that disconnect. So it was wild, something that I had no rational control over, had gone into the VR. So that's interesting. Cool.
Another thing that we're almost done, but just quickly, another thing that I thought was like interesting was I don't know how you put it, but I had a friend of mine, Tamara, who came with her partner, and she went first in the experience, in the VR thing at Centennial Park, and she was like, "Oh, I was noticing how my fingers were moving around the space and how they were touching things and holding things," and I thought, "Oh, that's right, because I've got narrow fingers, and my partner doesn't. I wonder how his hands will look." And I was like, "Oh, they're the same hands." But I just thought it was interesting how someone could, like recognize their idea of their hands within space as well. We also made some very nice, beautiful moss hands to be in that space. I think you probably showed them before in the demo. Is that right, Josh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, they were surprisingly accurate most of the time. Like this, very fine. Like this, it just doesn't like the interlocking hand.
Yeah.
Just goes. It feels very strange. It was fun.
And again, something I didn't think of because I kind of this is why it's great to have people who don't come from a tech background involved in developing things using technology, because even though I consider myself fairly like holistic thinker and fairly critical, I realized when people made comments about it breaking down that I had instinctively learned not to break it because it would make me feel bad that it wasn't working. So I knew exactly what to do. Doing demos, always doing it right.
Yeah.
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 I can play the background audio. I don't know if you can. Can you hear the audio that plays in the? Let's see.
Can you play now?
Yes. Okay. So let's see how loud it is. Oh, that's fairly quiet. I'll get the one with the water. That's quite nice. Yep. How about the third one? Okay, this one's quite nice. So it's spatial audio, but it's just playing through the normal thing. This is just sort of the background audio that we recorded for about 3.5 minutes of the space. Grace, can you hear it or not? I think it's okay.
It's not yet.
Not too loud, just you can hear the cockatoos off in the distance a little bit. You might be able to hear the water a little bit in the background as well.
Also on the day with the rugby team, which added
an
interesting undercurrent.
So you can hear the cockatoos a little bit there. Dylan asks, what if how do you imagine this collab developing further?
So good question. I'd like to make, first of all, hopefully Josh is on board with this. I would like to make a gallery version of it where I do some sculptural things that map out with the trees that we did that you can see in the space now. And I would like to, so I've used a variety of materials in the work I've been doing, like satin and velvet and different kinds of stuff. And I'd like to put some different man-made materials and also perhaps some other things like, bark, some natural stuff as well, in like a variety of curated textures on this sort of tree-like sculpture object in a gallery at some point, and hopefully incorporating that kind of the audio that Josh is playing for us now. So
do you mind if I show our
yeah,
let's see, I'm gonna proof it first just to make sure that there's nothing terrible in the midst of it.
Like a rugby team?
Enormous. 38 pages of different ideas and thoughts and bits and pieces in the midst of it. Yeah, it's quite nice. There's some good stuff. Okay, let's get what bit needs to be where. Okay, let's see what we can do. Oop, it's too big. hopefully this doesn't reveal too much behind the curtain. But it's always quite nice to just sort of skim through this. So this is just our set of different references and little tests. This was a little test of pre-made mossy rock material. Oh, we didn't show the sofa. Do I have pictures of the sofa?
The sofa was cool.
The sofa was cool. I've got some images of that as well. So what we did, the first thing that we were trying to do, a few different things. Emily Parsons' Lord project there. So this is sort of what I was thinking of. Your idea in your sketch of having a physically mapped thing that corresponded with the VR.
Yeah.
Can you see that, or have you got a?
That's I can see. Yeah, it's fine. It's just a lovely Kirsten Lee who's modeling for that while we're at work. It's just like, can you take the VR room and then we'll take a photo of you? She's like, okay. So yeah, that's the kind of vibe I'd like to perhaps one day do. Yeah, I feel a bit. I'm finding it hard to concentrate on the idea of having a real exhibition again, even though I know COVID times won't last forever, but
yeah,
it feels like it is right now. Yeah. But yes, I'd like to do some kind of interesting sculptural thing with it. Yeah, this dock was huge, and every day I feel like we're adding new stuff to it, and trying to figure out what we're doing. I think it was interesting with the couch as well because it helped inform my understanding of what the sort of hand mapping software stuff could do. That was the Fern Gully vibe, before I realized
touching things and having responsivity to it.
But so the hands, so new, the tracking, really good with most things, but hard collision surfaces, not like it. The idea of squishing something soft, which is half of my artwork, mapping with the hands is not going to work, which I think now I understand, but I didn't fully get the time. But it's going to go through the object in a 3D space, as opposed to squishing with it, which could be fun. But I guess that's maybe Oculus Quest version 2, perhaps. We'll understand squishing things, as opposed to just hard collision ones.
Yeah. It's next level stuff. Doing a world that's soft rather than a world that's hard and sort of rectangular shaped.
Maybe I can be
more complicated. I think that's it for our different references. What we did try, so the first time we were riffing on a demo that someone did where they'd modelled their apartment and were moving around. Let's see if I can find that.
That was really exciting. Mid-February this year.
This little video, and we did a test using photogrammetry rather than having to go through and sort of hand model everything. I think I've got a few images of that that I can show as well. Let's see, what's the documentation images that we've got. So I'm going to do this. Here's a video. Wow, this is totally mixed media. Is that showing? So this is our initial test of having a sofa that we scanned through photogrammetry in the 3D space and trying to get it all to match up. And also trying to figure out whether if we turned off the VR headset and turned it back on again, whether everything would stay in the right place, which it did. That was nice. I think I've got... we also did a 3D reconstruction of the Sydney Park playground. So this
that could have been good, but it was just that looked so good. The scan is amazing. The hard surface, but I was like, it's so far away from anything remotely natural. I was just like, I don't know how to link it to what I'm doing, but it was pretty cool, and it definitely would be the basis of another very cool artwork to maybe put things on the stairs and to physically climb it to get there.
It would be, assuming that you can get everything physically modeled, that would be a really fun one because it's so involved and it's soft as well. So if people fall over, it's not the end of the world. It's quite accommodating for either toddlers or people wearing VR headsets to figure out what they're doing in that space. Yeah, I think that's would have been nice to have. I put a lovely crocheted multicolour throw over the sofa to get it to reconstruct. I can't find pictures of that, even though it looks pretty funny to have a 3D model of a crocheted sofa. But that will have to do us for the moment. All right, so we're coming to the end of our time. He says in dire voice, if anyone has any extra questions or anything, let me see what my running sheet says that I need to do. I think do you want to maybe say, Grace, why now? Why are we doing this with this technology now?
Why now? Why not? I guess, I don't know, I think the whole project has left me with a lot of things to think about, particularly in relation to being trapped in our houses now that we didn't realize at the time, or was sort of just emerging on the horizon at the time I was making it. I think particularly now we're all strapped to our desks and our computer chairs, the idea of making something that's a little bit more closer to nature, even though it's completely fabricated and curated and stuff, but perhaps gives us a similar kind of a fake version of that joy that we get when we're in real nature is maybe more pressing now than it might have been a while ago, now that many of us don't have access to many natural places and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Why now for you, Josh?
Well, maybe this goes in with how do you guys get into VR and how did you meet? I mean, I think it's...
I met Josh ages ago.
Ages ago. I can't even remember how we met. But as I said in the intro, this is Grace is one artist of 9 artists who I'm working with to figure out how, if at all, new technologies and sort of predominantly VR can be used to work with their practice. So it's kind of, VR is coming out. My argument for why it's super important for artists to do it is because at the moment the people who are driving it are filmmakers and game makers.
And they keep making very not very novel directions necessarily.
Yeah. Although Half-Life Alyx with Rhys Darby as a voice actor in it is a good game. I hated it for the first 10 minutes, actually, that I played it, and then I got really into it. But they have squillions of dollars to make that game, and it's taken them years and years to do it. But yeah, in general, it's not very creative thinking, not very... not really...
boundary pushing, envelope pushing.
Exactly, yeah. And also there are certain questions that come out. We're quite familiar with what it means to be an audience to TV moving into streaming services, film moving into streaming services, all that sort of thing, how you watch certain things. But VR is so much, you'd say nascent. It's in the process of being formed. And that means a few things. That means that, people are still in the process of trying to figure out how to do certain things and what works and what doesn't work. It also means that there's an opportunity for people to sort of be part of the conversation of where it goes as well. I did a bunch of workshops with kids. Louise Zhang was helping me facilitate those, wrangling the kids. And it was really nice in all of those sort of workshop environments to give people an experience of VR that's an artwork, and it's the first VR that they've seen is something which is an artwork rather than something that's like $20 off of the App Store that's just a shooter or something. The idea that people see something that's been made and you can talk about the process of making it is really exciting, I think. Cool.
Another question people keep saying is, hey Grace, how can I work with Josh? How can I get in on this sweet VR studio? How?
Is that a question? Okay, well, your answer's on a postcard. Send it to this address. At the moment, we have the VR studio going until about July. If you're an artist that's interested in working, One exciting thing that I can say is that the COVID social distancing changes that we're having to respond to has meant that I'm in the process of changing the workshop so that it can be run as a sort of distance collaboration mentorship thing. So you don't need to be physically present. It's going to be interesting to see how it works. I'd say get in contact with me. Pretty much locked in until July. But after that, yeah, it would be fun to see what we could do.
I'd visit tacticalspace.org, is that right?
Tacticalspace.org or this Facebook group, Tactical Space Lab. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Okay. So apparently I need to say now thank you for joining us. It's pretty fun to share a little bit of virtual space for an hour and a bit on a Sunday. And hopefully, if you've got any last minute questions, now's the time to fling them up on the comments. Otherwise,
Thank you, Australia Council.
I didn't hear what that was. I don't know if anyone else did.
Thanks, Australia Council, for funding.
Thank you. Again, acknowledge Australia Council for the funding. And the next live stream we will announce on the Tactical Space Lab website. And all of the ones that we've recorded so far and into the future will be archived both on the Facebook group, where you can find out about further events, and also on tacticalspace.org. Cool beans. All right. Well, thank you so much, and see you next time.
See you soon.